So what would you say to people who are truly, what would you say about people that are truly victimized in situations?
They're truly victimized because they victimize themselves. If there's something that happened to them that's terrible, which has happened to everybody, I would imagine, while we're here, we can either make ourselves a victim in that situation or not. Having been through something like that, I don't know. For me, at that time, I don't know why. I don't have a total explanation. I did not ever think of myself as a victim, so I never was. It's really that simple. I mean, it didn't change what happened. It changed how I took what happened. Okay. How I reacted to it and what I did with it after, which was virtually nothing. I went back to my regular life. I was fortunate in that whatever it was about the situation didn't make me do that. But by the same token, anyone could do it. We just have to see that we can do it. That's all. It could be a traumatic experience, and it could be something that's very difficult to get through, but you can still get through it. If you say I'm a victim, it's out of my control, it's hopeless, bang, that's it. There's nothing you can do then. It's giving yourself the power to change it, because you do have it. We're just not aware of it. And it sounds kind of crass or cold to say, hey, the victimized people, they made themselves victims. They didn't make themselves victims in terms of, okay, here I am, abuse me, or here I am, I'll get struck by lightning, or whatever it might be. They made themselves victims after the fact. The fact is still the fact. But, you don't have to sit around and be depressed. Maybe it's a huge emotional upheaval. Well, you do have to deal with that. There's no denying that. But you do have to deal with it in the end. You don't run away from it. You don't fight it. You deal with it. You may need help in dealing with it. That's all fine. That needs to be done. But in the end, we're the ones that make ourselves victims or not. And that's, I think, the truth of the matter beyond whatever emotional attachment anyone or I may have to someone else's or my own circumstances where I could feel victimized or the other person could. It's still, in the end, we can control that. We can do something with that. We don't have to sit around being victims forever. We don't deny what happened. We don't deny any emotions that went on or do go on. We don't deny our reactions. They're all valid and important for us to get what's going on. But we can transcend it all. It is possible to do.
And so what is the relationship to what you're talking about and forgiveness?
I think the whole key is forgiveness. That is the whole thing. Without forgiveness, none of it can happen.
But you and I have talked before about how forgiveness is a word that is often misunderstood or often, pigeonholed in a way, for lack of a better term, that limits it. Because
Yeah.
it's much more expansive than what we generally think of. Like, okay, this person did this to me, and I am going to let him off the hook.
Right. Yeah, that's not really in the end what it is. That may be part of it. But just as, when I was brought up Catholic, we had to go to confession, which I hated doing and mostly avoided it whenever I could, because I didn't want to tell some priest this stuff that I did, even though he couldn't see who I was. But what is that about? It's about sin and forgiveness. Confession. That's what it's about. It's okay, I committed a sin, which is the traditional definition of the word, how I saw it. And I'm seeking forgiveness, which I actually was not. I just saw it as an obligation of something I had to do when I was younger. Neither sin nor forgiveness mean what they mean on the surface at heart. They both mean, okay, I went this way. This wasn't best for me or someone else or the environment. I get it. I'm letting that go and going another way. If you don't let it go, you can't go the other way. You're still holding on inside to the old way of doing things, the old actions that you did, the old way of seeing it. You have to let it all go, and that's forgiveness. Then renewal can happen. Then you can start new. It's by the old way dying and taking in the new, and that's not an easy thing to do. When you're functioning from the level of ego, you don't want to do that at all. The resistance is huge. So you allow the resistance. It's there. You don't shy away from any of it. So forgiveness really is letting go of the old. And that's how you become a new person. And if, having a grudge against someone else, that's all part of the picture. It's not like the old meaning of this is wrong. It's just not complete, I don't think. Hold the grudge, get rid of the grudge. If you have something that is a problem you have with someone else, we'll find out what the situation is from the other person, as it says in the New Testament. Go and talk to the person first, then make your offering at the temple. Let go of that. Be willing to listen, and the other person has to as well in order for that to work. But that's the only way you're going to move on. If you hold on to any old ways of doing things, that's going to stall your growth. So I think, when someone does something, you say, okay, in the end, I would have to forgive. You can't do that genuinely. Don't pretend you can. Work through whatever's involved first, till you get to the point where you can see the value of, just get rid of this. This has nothing to do with my life now. I want to move on.
Yeah, I think that last part, I'd like to spend a little bit more time there, because my next question for you is going to be, how do you work through what you need to work through and let go at the same time? So, but then you're saying that you can't let go until you spend the time in it. You can't bypass that.
Right.
You have to spend the time and with whatever it is for as long as you need to.
Yep.
But in that space, there's a lot of suffering that comes with it.
Yeah, it's having the perspective when you do it. That's probably the value of counseling. That's someone on the outside that isn't going through it and hopefully understands what's going on and can work with you, that can illuminate it as you go through it. Going through it is part of letting go. If you repress it, run away from it, fight it, you're not letting go. The ego is still in charge and is unwilling to accept whatever it is that happened, unwilling to accept the reactions and the emotions that are involved in that. You have to transcend that ego thing, and going through the whole situation, feeling it and accepting it, especially, is part of letting go. That's the letting go process. So I'd say, even though it appears on the surface you're not letting go and you do it, you are. It's by allowing this to happen, to be there, because it is. You're simply looking at the real situation internally and coming to more and more awareness of what's going on there. And I think for most people, they need someone to bounce it off of. And then, you can work through it quicker, and then you can do it on your own. And in the end, you may be able to forgive. I can't say everyone would be able to do that. But if they see the situation clearly, not just an ego interpretation of it, but the whole situation clearly, and I think it has tremendous value to talk to whoever it is that you may have a problem with, from that open place. While you're stuck in ego and stuck in those emotions, it won't do any good to talk to the person. But in the end, forgiveness helps you. It doesn't do the other person any harm by holding a grudge. It's doing you harm. Just let it go. That's easier said than done. Way easier said than done. It's kind of like, love everybody. Yeah. Show me someone that does that. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do, but it is easy to do, or easier to do, the more you're not caught up in your ego reactions and definitions of the world and with whatever happens to you. Go beyond it. It becomes more and more spontaneous, easier and easier, as you see beyond the surface things in yourself, and as a result in others and in events.
It kind of reminds me a bit of the healing process where you have to go through some painful parts of it before you have the healing.
Right. It is a healing process.
Hmm.
It is what we have to do. We're caught up in the pain. The Course would say, that's sin. You're caught up in the illusion. Get out of it. There's no more pain. When you're fully out of it, you're not experiencing pain. Pain may go on, but you are not experiencing it because you understand who you are. You're not ego. You're not actions. You're not emotions. You're not thoughts. Those are the things that experience pain. And that sounds crazy.
Well, it does sound crazy. I think because we've become so embedded in our, relationship to our suffering and pain.
Right.
It's become part of our identity.
Yes. Yeah, we own it. We own it like it's ours. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
They're actions. They're experiences that we go through that come and go, like everything else. Some of them, well, you could say, suppose, I get diagnosed with terminal cancer or something. I have to go through it for the rest of my life, but that's still temporary. If I'm caught up in it's all this, then it's going to be a horrendous tragedy. But if I'm not, it won't be. Not that, it doesn't affect you in any way. Of course it will. But it just means that you're not completely engrossed in it in a way that would make you take away the rest of the pleasure of your life.
Mm.
It's like, okay, this is what's going on. I'm never going to recover. I'm going to get worse. That's it. But that's it for everybody in the end. I mean, if that's what we have to go through, can we learn from it? That's a big lesson to learn. That's a huge thing. Can everybody do it? Probably not. I don't know. We don't know till we are in the middle of it. That's the only way we can tell. We can speculate, right now, but that doesn't really mean anything. You have to actually experience it.
Yes, and this internal letting go and this individual experience with it is, I'm hoping, helps us to apply that to the a larger scale, because I think there's a lot of I mean, these words are very difficult for me. We've talked about this a lot, but these words, sin and forgiveness, are very difficult for me because they come with, I mean, like, they're just infused with a whole history of my particular religious history and the social, history that I have been exposed to. So I'm sure it's that way for many, many people, but in what we're looking at in the world today, these ideas of sin and forgiveness, one, they inform a lot of reactivity, but two, they're the key to unpacking all of that and to riding this wave and to live more peacefully in it. We see just some tremendously disruptive things happening in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more disruptive it is, the more we react emotionally from our egos, and the more we can't see a bigger picture. We can't see, okay, maybe there's more here, or there's more here for me to see and to understand. We can have the reaction of, okay, this guy's an idiot, and what he's doing is wrong and it's terrible. But a lot of people think it's great. What do we do with that? Do we say, okay, they're still all people, including the person we would define as an idiot? He's still a person. He's seeing it from where he's seeing it. He thinks it's right. The people that are listening to him think it's right. Do I condemn them? Well, what good is that? What good is judging them? The ideas may not be good ideas, but for some people, they think it is. This is a great idea to do this. This is the way things should be, without taking into account a larger picture. We do the same things. We do it too, maybe just not in that area. By doing it, we become more aware of what we're doing. Okay, it's in the doing, it's in making the mistakes or committing the sin with the surface level of the meaning that we come to know it's a sin, it's a mistake, it's something that's not good for our growth or for other people's growth. You know, that it's by going through that we get it. So there's a value to it, even though on the surface it doesn't seem like a good idea at all.
And so the as we mentioned before, the Course lays out sin as participating in the illusion, or identifying with the illusion, listening to the lie, being part of the lie, being unconscious. But I don't read it when I see it there because of the religious connotation, the background. For me, sin is tied to, blame and guilt. But this is not that. This is something different.
Right. Well, I have the same type of definition for those words because I was brought up with the same definitions. You know, sin and guilt, and you're a bad person, and nobody's worthy, and nobody's any good, and the only way to do it is to what they say, the typical born again thing is, accept Jesus as your savior, saving you from all this sin and guilt and suffering and everything. And that's the only way you're going to get to heaven. Well, that's kind of letting go of ego, isn't it? Take over. I'm letting go. Yo, that's it. I can't do it. You have to do it. I let go. If it's done genuinely, I don't know what the percentage of people that say they do it genuinely. I mean, I have no way of knowing that. But that's really what it is, I think. And if you do it genuinely, I think it does have an effect on you. I don't know if it's permanent. Maybe in some instances it is. I listened to a guy from down south talk about his experience of being saved. Okay. And I was curious because this guy is no theologian for sure, or philosopher, does not have, lots of degrees or anything of that sort at all. He's just a regular guy who lives down south who went through this saved experience. And what he said sounded exactly right to me. The first time he did it, he was a kid, and he said, okay, I did it, but nothing really happened. I'm just feeling okay. He was a kid. I mean, who can do that when they're a kid? So it was later, and he did it again, and he said something happened. He really felt something occur inside that he could not put into words. Those are usually the key words for what it's about. No words. You can't put this into words. You can't talk about it. You can't communicate it, except you can use words among a group of people that have had the experience, and they'll know what you mean. Without the experience, you really don't. So even in this context, and of course, then he took the experience and interpreted it in terms of fundamentalist Christianity. Well, the interpretation I would disagree with, but the experience is a human, universal experience that's been going on from the beginning of humanity and is still going on today. It has nothing to do with what you believe in. It has nothing to do with, your definitions of sin and saved and all that kind of stuff. It has to do with a state of your central nervous system, that certain things are set up that are conducive to create that state. And that's what religions have done. They've created these things that will allow you to experience it. And at least in some instances, I think this born again thing, however they have it set up, I've never done it, allows some people to have this experience. Again, the percentage, I don't know. What they do with it, I disagree with, but it's still a genuine, real experience that can change someone's life. So what I'm saying is all of these definitions that we've had, and he has those definitions and still has them, have no bearing on the actual reality. Those are the illusions. The reality is untouched by any of the illusions. We can think whatever we want. We can, believe whatever we want. That state of being remains the same regardless. And when we become conscious of it, it changes us. So that's what we have to do. That's what I had to do. I think that's what we all have to do. That's what he did, except he went back to the beliefs. Okay, whatever works for you.
So he has it almost like condensed into a moment where he can like say it happened in a moment.
Yeah,
I wonder, for me, I don't feel like it happened in a singular moment that happens all the time,
that's
on a day-to-day basis.
right.
And so one time, as someone came to me, and they were questioning my beliefs, and said, have you accepted Jesus as your personal savior? And I said, every single day, because as you and I have talked, it's that process of letting go, which doesn't happen once, because
Right.
you're always grasping and trying to, rein it back in, and hold back on to whatever it is that you're holding on to. So for me, I can say that because I don't I don't define Jesus in a particular way, and I don't define the saved in a particular way that condenses it to this one moment in this one event. And it's still just as meaningful to me. But that's also rejected by many other teachers.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think it has to be every day. It has to be all the time. To have one moment, well, that gets lost. And I think what happens when the belief system comes in is the ego comes in and takes it over and makes this structured thing that you have to do this way and that way and so on. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. For me, it was very stifling, but it depends on the person. They feel secure and safe now. Okay, I'm saved, I'm going to heaven. That's it. Like the rest of their life doesn't count. I don't know. I mean, it does count as to what you do with it after that. But if you are constantly getting your nervous system in that state so that you can experience that level of consciousness over and over again, that's going to have a much bigger impact on you. And you'll be able to expand that experience more and more as life goes on. Not put it in a box, not put it inside a structured belief system necessarily, but put it into the context of a simple human experience as part of our potential that we can fulfill. And that's it. If you want to believe what you want to believe, that's okay. But this experience is not based on belief. The belief can be part of the path for you to get to that state, but it's not that state. It has nothing to do with belief, has nothing to do with thought, emotion, or anything. That all comes in later. Might be a few seconds later, or a split second later, but it's later. It's that
So
expansive.
first is the experience.
What's that?
So first is the experience.
Right. Experience first, then how we respond to it, what we do with it is the whole thing. That's what's happened is the experience, since it's beyond words, since it's beyond any definition, beyond anything we can point to, it gets lost. And the belief system and the things we do with it becomes front and center when it's not front and center. It's a byproduct of the experience. And it's a byproduct of a personal experience, So, Muhammad has an experience in a cave, in whenever it was, the 600s or so, whenever it was. And he understood it from his perspective. And there it is. Jesus has an experience, understands it from his perspective. Moses, whoever it is, the rishis, Buddha, Lao Tzu, and so on, they all have these experiences and they express it. And the amazing thing is, if you have the experience and you look at what they say, they're all saying the same thing. Don't bother to interpret, take it from the experience and you'll get what they're talking about. It's a different context, different language, different geography, different time. You got to take all that into account, different social structures around them and social norms and so on. But the experience remains the same. And I think you find it in shamanism. You'll find it everywhere because it is everywhere. It's a state that we can gain, and all of these traditions have made all these methods to get us to experience it. And yet we seem to ignore the experience. And because it's so easy to get caught up back in the ego, what's happening around you, what's happening within you, in your emotions, your background, and on and on and on. That's not it, though. It's really not it.
One of the things that I've been thinking about recently is that, as we move from the experience to the beliefs, this is where the stories happen.
Mhm.
And the stories can be both expansive and they can also contract, right? So if we get fixated on a certain story around it, we can sort of limit the experience. And on the other hand, the the story is the only way that we can actually communicate, even
Right.
though it's limited, the experience that we're having. And so we move into this place of, I think, the story or the sacred text or whatever it happens to be. At first it was oral tradition, right, that was passed on, and it was to try to keep that experience alive.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's it. It came from the experience. You can't translate it into words, yet words can be a pathway to it. You know, methods can be a pathway to it. Prayer techniques, meditation techniques, and all kinds of other things can be pathways to it. They're not it, but they're pathways to it. So as a community grew around the experience and other people had it, they were communicating it to others. At first, through experience. Okay, even Christianity, Pentecost was an experience, and when they preached, the people understood. They even heard them in their own language. It was something that transcended the limitations of what we use in order to talk about these experiences. But then when you don't have the experience, you really don't know what they're talking about, and that's why we have so many diverse understandings of the way to get to it, because we're not even getting to it. We're staying on the surface of the methods and the ideas and not going with the experience itself that generated these ideas in the first place. So, the more we're caught up in the surface level, the more we're off base, I think. And, how many types of Christianity are there? And take anything. You can take a new religious movement, and there'll be branches away from it saying, no, they're doing that wrong. That it's all ego. It's all ego. It doesn't mean it's wrong to do that. If there's another way of looking at it, and there's infinite ways, if we're dealing with infinity, that's fine. Diversity is great. But realize it's all about the same thing. The diversity is simply unity in expression. We're taking it like there's no unity, and there isn't any as a result.
Right. You said you touched on something that I wanted to get there, because as I was looking at this opening chapter in my Intro to World Religions class, there was this definition of or a breakdown of what constitutes religion, and it was talking about experience, belief, and ritual. And
Mhm.
as you were talking about these as rituals, as pathways, I thought that was interesting, because it made me remember that these are we're essentially talking about the three components here. But I think
Mhm.
it's more than what constitutes religion. It's something about what constitutes human, um what, I don't know what the word is. I can't find a word. Expansiveness, expanse,
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
awakening, and I don't
Right.
want to say awakening because that indicates an event, but I want to say the human experience coming into relationship with the divine.
Hmm.
And
Which
yet, even that indicates a separation.
right, and on our surface experience, it is in the beginning. It is a dichotomy. If we're talking about total infinity and we're living in total finite, it's like that's total opposite. In the beginning, it seems to be an opposite thing. As you get deeper into it, you realize it's not. It's actually the same thing. It's the way we experience it. It seems to be opposite. But I would say, the experience and belief and so on, and even ritual, that's part of government too. That's part of anything in life. Don't we have a routine when we get up in the morning? Make sure you get this done, this done, and this done. It's kind of a ritual, and your experience is this works, so I will do it. And that's your belief about it. I mean, the infinity, I think it's infinity. It's everywhere. That's how we do everything. And we could learn how to get to transcendence by anything at all, because it's everywhere. Where is infinity not? I mean, yeah, anything could bring us there. Some things are just more conducive to getting us there more quickly, and those things we term religion. They can also be huge obstacles for us getting there, depending on whether they deliver the experience or not, which I think basically they don't. Maybe
are you talking now about the rituals that could be obstacles, or what are you talking about?
Yeah, anything in religion can be an obstacle if you don't follow the pathway to the experience. How many times did I go to church? I could never count it. Huge numbers of times. And when did I ever get the experience there? I don't know. I think I got it a few times. I didn't know what it was, but I think I got it maybe 4 times out of the, I don't know, 40,000 times or whatever the number is that I've been, which is a lot, since I went all the time when I was a kid and it all went over my head. I think I found more of the genuine thing being in the the summer cabin we had in the woods than I did in church. But I did experience something when I was 15 years old, receiving communion. I didn't know what it was. It felt great, and I recognize it now, but I didn't then. I didn't even know what it had to do with.
Could you say more about the experience and the comparison between what you experienced at communion and what you experienced at the summer cabin when you were a kid?
The commonality between the two would be kind of joy and freedom. When I received the communion, it was our, they called it theology. It was kind of wasn't, but I guess it kind of was. We were only sophomores in high school, and it was Catholic high school. So he said we should do a mass, and he just did it. And I received the communion, and something happened. Not immediately. It was probably about maybe 15, 20 minutes later. Something happened, and I felt it for weeks after that. I had no idea what it was. It just felt great. There was an actual internal smell or scent that went with it that I can't describe. And that when I would smell that, and I would smell it when I exhaled. Usually, outer scent, you inhale to get it. This was exhale to get it. And it was a great feeling whenever that scent would come to me. And then it just gradually diminished. I didn't even notice when it went away. In the summertime, when I would live in the cabin out in the woods with, my parents and brother and so on, I would have that same feeling of total freedom, no school, and real joy, not happiness because I was out of school. That was there too, but there was a deeper relationship and a real kind of almost unity with all the trees. Very little, improvement of the land. It was just the land raw as it was. Where we were, it was a yard, and a house, obviously, and, a barn and an outhouse, and, and no running water and no electricity. And it was right on a pond. And the water, especially in the morning when the sun would come up, sometimes I would get up and go out and sit on the dock and watch the sun come up. And it was the most incredible experience. There was something there with the sun rising and watching it sparkle all over the waves on the pond, and all the turtles coming out of the water to sun themselves on the rocks, and all of this. It was this, I'm talking about it in terms of bits, but it was a wholeness to it. And all these things would be manifestations of that wholeness. So in many ways, I felt it more there than I did after the communion. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what communion really was, to have any idea, even though I was taught it and the whole thing. It was all words. The experience happened then, and it happened 2 other times at communion. And once I went to a thing where they had a consecrated piece of bread in the they call it a monstrance, which means to demonstrate. It's something to show this. And it was at night, there was almost no one there, and I sat there and I felt like I started meditating. I just sat there. That's all I did. But this whole silence really totally engulfed me. And I walked away from there kind of feeling high and happy and so on. Those are my experiences with church doing it. So I know there's something there. It's not
I would call these sacred moments or sacred spaces. You're identifying what to me, what sacred experience is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's something that I experience every day now from meditating. Every day. It's always there. It never goes away. Why only have, as you were talking, this one experience of, say, communion? You want to put it in a religious context. If not, of just the sun coming up, which is the same thing to me. There's still a communion happening there. Whatever, and then it goes away. When you can have it all the time, that's when you really start getting it, I think. Having one experience or two or three or once a week at church or whatever it is, I don't think cuts it. Of course, these people say, pray and read the Bible and so on. Maybe you'll get it that way too, and it'll be more often. I don't know that for sure. I don't know any of it for sure. But I do know what I've experienced and what I continue to experience now. And I think that's what the Course is talking about when it comes to sin and forgiveness. Being in touch with that level beyond our usual everyday life, which we're living from anyway. We just have to be aware of it. That's all. Just have more awareness. And that really involves working through all kinds of internal conflicts and things that are inside. We have to do that. There's a huge personal psychological component to getting this done. But if we leave out the experience, we're never going to get it.